Welcome to Massage-2A-BB, a stunning planet in the binary star system of Akicha. Here, we serve as pioneers for FICSIT, a shadowy, space-faring corporation driven to explore and exploit this planet's natural resources for a mysterious project assembly, an effort to save humanity. This is part 2 of our journey. So far, we've constructed a chaotic but functional factory to complete the first 3 phases of project assembly, unlocking all the technologies from tiers 1 to 6. Now, it's time to put our data engineering skills to the ultimate test. Can we overcome the intricate challenges of phase 4 and 5? Well, grab a drink, a snack, sit back and relax, and let's dive in together. With the completion of Project Assembly Phase 3, we've unlocked Tiers 7 and 8, and the complexity of our production chains is about to skyrocket. So to kick things off, we're setting up a proper production line for computers. Recently, we unlocked an alternative recipe for crystal computers, which significantly reduces the need for circuit boards, relying instead on crystal oscillators and produces computers faster than the standard recipe. Our first step is to repurpose the manufacturer that was previously churning out computers to produce crystal oscillators instead. Luckily, this machine already has cables running into it, making the transition a little smoother. Next, we locate the highest point in our factory where reinforced iron plates are used, split off a belt, and route it in through the north wall and upward. The belts on our manufacturer floor are starting to resemble a bowl of spaghetti more than anything a qualified engineer would design, but at least our reinforced iron plates make their way into the oscillator manufacturer. Finally, we bring in the quartz crystal, putting our smart splitters to good use. These prioritize sending materials upstairs while overflowing the excess to storage. With all the components in place, the crystal oscillator manufacturer roars to life, giving us half the ingredients we need for computer production. On the assembler floor, we split off a belt of high-speed connectors. These need to be stored since they're also used in crafting smart splitters. Fortunately, the assembler designated for computer production is conveniently located on the same floor, so connecting the component isn't much of a challenge. With high-speed connectors in place, we bring down the freshly made crystal oscillators from upstairs, power everything up, and watch our computer assemblers get to work. Progressing further requires 100 computers to unlock bauxite refinement milestone. While we wait for production to catch up, we head out to the pink forest, ominously named the Forest of Death, to lay down a road for easier access. Along the way, we encounter local wildlife and naturally inform them of our development plans, much to their dismay, I imagine. Next, we head over to our oil processing facility to make use of the polymer resin, a byproduct of fuel production. This allows us to research synthetic polyester fabric in the MAM.
Research completed. Polyester fabric recipe unlocked.
Since we've been sinking the resin to ensure smooth fuel production, setting up a small refinery to turn it into fabric feels like a worthwhile side project. The setup is straightforward, requiring polymer resin and a little bit of water, and it sure will come in handy down the line. With fabric automated, we can finally research gas masks in the map.
Research completed. Gas mask and filter unlocked.
Around the same time, our computers finish production, allowing us to unlock our first Tier 7 milestone, bauxite refinement.
Milestone reached. Bauxite is refined into aluminum products via a multi-step process. Considering your past achievements, you should have the minimum required skill to overcome these new production challenges. If it helps, many others have done this before, so if you fail, someone else will eventually succeed.
Ada seems to have faith that we can conquer this complex production chain. It demands a mix of raw materials, bauxite, silica from raw quartz, coal, and a significant amount of water. Given the logistical nightmare of transporting water back to our base, we decide to process the bauxite on-site into aluminum ingots before hauling it home. The bauxite node itself seems like the perfect spot for this new factory. To prepare, we head over to our quartz mine, set up a new miner, and run a belt all the way back to the pink forest. Then we locate a coal node in the forest, establish another miner, and belt the coal back to our bauxite site. With these key materials converging, we're ready to dive into aluminum production. If you're enjoying the video and you want to support Data Engineer Plays, don't forget to leave a like and hit that subscribe button. And if you have any feedback or suggestions, feel free to share them in the comments section. Building offsite factories has been a challenge, mostly due to our limited inventory space. Thankfully, there's a fantastic quality of life upgrade hidden in the MAM tree under alien technology, dimensional storage. To unlock it, however, we need to track down a rare alien ore called SAM. We scour the map in search of a node, but come up empty-handed. Along the way, we do stumble upon several Mercer spheres, which might come in handy for this side project. Eventually, we discover a suspicious-looking stone arch in the grassy fields. Beneath it lies a deep, shadowy hole. Clearing out the poisonous wildlife guarding the entrance, we carefully lay ramps to descend safely. At the bottom, we're greeted by the beautiful yet eerie glow of the mysterious purple SAM ore.
The strange alien matter, colloquially known as SAM, seems to be in its dormant crystalline state, meaning it won't break down your body into its base atomic components on touch. This living matter is extremely versatile and has countless applications. Research it in the MAM to establish locally appropriate classification and application, as well as a secure method of awakening.
Ada's cryptic explanation of the ore's properties is a bit unsettling, but we follow her advice and start researching the SAM analysis to figure out how to awaken this alien material.
SAM reanimation recipe unlocked. SAM can now be safely awakened, provided it is contained. Meaning, if not contained in special electromagnetic storage, it tends to start breaking atomic bonds of any matter it has physical contact with, and reconstructing it into easily transportable resources.
Scripture and blood compose harmony. Follow our hallowed temple halls and listen to the echoes of your ripples. Our bones are more beautiful than yours.
We bring power down into the cavern and set up a drill to efficiently extract the SAM ore. The next step is sending it directly into constructors to craft reanimated SAM. Because clearly, reanimating this mysterious alien ore can only lead to good things, right? Once we've stockpiled enough reanimated SAM, we unlock the SAM fluctuator node.
SAM fluctuator recipe unlocked. The fluctuator can mimic unique communication through patterns of electric frequencies to instruct reanimated SAM to perform specific tasks or give specific restrictions, such as matter to energy conversion. It can also function as matter memory, reading the exact composition and state of a collection of matter in one location, breaking it down, and near instantly reconstructing it in another location, which has incredible potential for smart storage.
Your threads shift solid to fluid to a tapestry, matter and mind and melody.
Ada's technobabble at this point feels like it's deliberately designed to confuse us, but we press on. To complete this upgrade, we need to craft several SAM fluctuators. To make this back and forth trip to the SAM site less tedious, we set up a hypertube. Armed with the right materials, we return to the site, manually craft a few fluctuators, and finally unlock dimensional storage.
Dimensional depot unlocked. SAM can be utilized to deconstruct matter down to its chemical elements in one dimension, and the Mercer sphere allows it to be transferred and stored in another. Once parts are fed into the dimensional depot, they can be accessed by the Pioneer inventory and build gun system at any time, anywhere.
We see through the window. It is pathetic. Consume more blood.
Dimensional storage introduces a revolutionary feature, the ability to upload physical materials to cloud storage, letting us access them anywhere without taking up inventory space. As a test, we use concrete since our Mercer sphere supply is too limited to store everything just yet. While we're at it, we unlock a few other MAM tree nodes like compacted coal and turbo fuel. They aren't immediately useful, but I'm sure they'll come in handy down the line. Looking deeper into the alien technology tree, we notice that advancing further will require a substantial amount of SAM fluctuators. It's clear that we need a proper production line. We start by transporting the SAM ore out of the cavern to a truck stop, and then setting up a corresponding truck stop back at our base. After recording a new tractor route, SAM ore begins making its way home. At the base, we establish a new factory section for SAM processing. We feed the ore into a row of constructors to produce reanimated SAM, which then heads into a manufacturer to create SAM fluctuators. Unfortunately, this process requires wire, which is located quite far away. To solve this, we implement a new design, smart splitters. By placing one before the wire storage container, we prioritize the split for our SAM factory while overflowing the excess into storage. The copper wire is routed under the floor to keep things tidy, while the nearby steel pipes are easily brought in. With everything connected, our SAM fluctuator manufacturer begins stockpiling materials for future alien technology research. While we wait for the production to ramp up, we take some time to improve the factory's aesthetics, cleaning up the north wall and making everything look a little bit more polished. We also hunt down additional Mercer spheres, giving us more capacity for dimensional storage. Soon, we've stockpiled hundreds of SAM fluctuators, more than enough to dive deeper into the MAM tree and build additional dimensional depots. Our first upgrade allows dimensional depots to upload materials faster and store twice as many stacks.
Dimensional expansion increased to 200%.
Testing this out, we randomly select materials like modular frames and start uploading them. Every item stored in Dimensional Depot is one less material cluttering up our inventory, a game changer for managing resources. We continue cleaning up the MAM tree, unlocking useful upgrades like radar technology. Building a radar tower reveals a wealth of information on the map, including the location of mesospheres, summer sloop, and hard drives within its radius. With this new intel, we hunt down even more mesospheres to expand our dimensional storage network, covering most of our common building materials. Finally, we unlock the Alien Power Augmenter.
Power Augmenter unlocked. Summer sloops naturally harvest. Yes, harvest energy from distant sources and distribute it locally. The Power Augmenter supercharges summer sloops by feeding it local power, increasing its harvesting range and efficiency, and thus power output. Basically, the more power it's given, the more it provides.
Ada promises this device can harness the energy of summer sloops to supercharge our power grid. It sounds incredibly useful, but there's one catch. We need 10 summer sloop to build it, and unfortunately, we don't have nearly enough. Yet. Time to dive back into setting up our aluminum factory. To make life easier, we've created a brand new blueprint for a hypertube cannon, shooting us straight up to the bauxite site we set up earlier. Hopefully, we don't need to make too many round trips now that our dimensional storage has our back, magically granting us access to most of our materials via the cloud. The aluminum ingot production process is no joke. It's a tangled web of steps, each creating byproducts that can throw a wrench into the system if left unchecked. We kick things off with a row of constructors to produce silica. Precision is key here. Some of the silica constructors are clocked down to hit exactly 250 silica output total, leaving the rest to come as byproduct from later stages. Next, we need precisely 2.5 refineries to churn out alumina solution. So we build 3 and clock one down to 50%. This step requires bauxite and water, producing alumina solution and silica as a byproduct. Fortunately, the bauxite node is conveniently right next to our factory, a prime reason why we chose this location. There's also a nearby river for water extraction, though a family of flying crabs isn't too thrilled about our presence. A few persuasive bullets later convince them to relocate. We set up 3 water extractors, each clocked to 100 cubic meters of water, hitting the 300 cubic meters we need. With water and bauxite flowing into the refineries, we're ready to roll. To keep things organized, we introduced a little color coding, blue for the water pipes and white for the alumina solution refineries. This small touch goes a long way in making sense of the chaos. The next step takes us deeper into the process. More refineries come online to transform alumina solution into alumina scrap. It's a delicate balance. We need exactly 1.25 refineries for this, as the process produces both scrap and water. Overproducing the water would grind the system to a halt. The alumina solution from earlier gets piped in, while coal from a nearby miner joins the mix. Sticking to the system, we color code our alumina solution pipe to be white and give the scrap refineries a sleek carbon steel finish. Managing the water output is a bit tricky. To keep things flowing smoothly, we route the byproduct water under the floor and connect it back to the main water pipe from the extractors. This ensures perfect equilibrium with just the right amount of water for the alumina solution refineries to run without interruption. Finally, it's time to tackle the last step, foundries for aluminum ingots. We set up 5 foundries, piping in the aluminum scrap from the walls and feeding in the silica from the 2 sources. Silica constructors deliver their output to the subfloor before feeding it into the foundries. At the same time, silica byproduct from the refineries joins the mix. Both streams merge seamlessly in the subfloor to keep the foundries running efficiently. If our math checks out, we should now be producing 300 aluminum ingots per minute. The next challenge, getting them back to base. A train feels excessive for the short distance, so we try out our newly unlocked trucks. Unfortunately, their massive size and clunky turning radius force us to expand the road and carve out a turnaround area. Looking ahead to the complexities of tier 7, 8 and 9, we decide against cramming more into our current factory. Instead, we mark out a brand new section on the far side of the train stations. With the fresh blueprints in hand, we begin setting up our standard 8x8 factory modules, complete with walls for a polished look. With our new road and factory sections ready, we add truck stops for aluminum transport. After tweaking the road connections to the pink forest and giving the truck enough room to maneuver, we record its delivery path and officially automate aluminum ingot transport. Welcome to the aluminum age. Back at base, we set up assemblers to convert the ingots into alclad aluminum sheets. This process requires copper in addition to aluminum, but luckily we have extra copper ingots lying around. Using the subfloor to hide the belts, we run copper and aluminum into the assemblers and start cranking out sheets. To store these precious aluminum sheets, we build a new storage area under the train stations, space we'll surely need for future materials. Although it seems our truck is less than enthused about our plan. After some adjustments, we finally get the sheets stockpiled. With our first batch of aluminum sheets, we unlock the hover pack milestone.
Milestone reached. The hover pack draws energy from nearby power connections and so can only be used in their vicinity. It provides an excellent vantage point of your work, which you clearly need. Otherwise, you would have optimized that obvious problem by now.
It's as if Ada read our minds. This new tool gives us a perfect vantage point for building. Now we can float effortlessly around the base. No scaffolding, no balconies required. Progress has never felt so freeing. With hoverpacks unlocking a whole new level of efficiency, we also gained access to Logistics Mark V, introducing belts and lifts capable of moving items at a staggering 780 units per minute.
Milestone reached. FICSIT dedicated this milestone to the conveyor belt and lift Mark V. They may be implying that your factory could be further optimized. While they are correct, I believe they are setting unreasonable expectations. Having all of humanity very definitely relying on your work is a lot of pressure. It's a good thing I'm here.
Yes, Ada, we're all very grateful for having such a helpful and definitely non-sarcastic AI assistant. With several outposts spread across the map and our main base bustling with activity, it's high time we gave them proper names for easier navigation. Creativity isn't exactly my forte, so I turned to my viewers for inspiration. The winning name for our main base, Manufactoria. We proudly install some signs at the highway entrance and update our train station to match its new identity. For the oil processing outpost, the suggestion was Nymeria, a regal name for a vital operation. We head over to erect some billboards and rename the station, bringing a sense of cohesion to our sprawling network. But enough fun or Ada will chime in with complaints about wasted time, so back to work on our aluminum section. The next item on the list, aluminum casing. A straightforward task requiring just a row of constructors to convert aluminum ingots into casing. To prepare for the future, we install smart splitters, routing any overflow into storage. Both casings and sheets are likely to play a significant role in upcoming production chains. However, something's amiss. The aluminum ingots aren't flowing smoothly as expected. The system should be pushing 300 per minute, but it's far from that. The culprit? A rookie mistake. I used Mark I pipes for the water supply instead of Mark II at our aluminium processing facility. With the alumina solution process demanding more than 300 cubic meters per minute, the pipes just couldn't keep up. Quick upgrade fixed the problem, and soon enough the aluminum ingots are streaming in properly. With the flow restored and the casings churn out at full speed, we box them up and begin stockpiling for future milestones and construction needs. Next, we tackle a growing issue with plastic production. Our current setup turns heavy oil residue into packaged fuel, but without a proper sink, the packaged fuel eventually clogs the system, halting plastic production. So far, it hasn't been a major issue, but with the increased demand for plastic, it's time for a permanent solution. Instead of fuel, we reconfigure the process to produce petroleum coke, a solid byproduct that can be easily sunk without the hassle of packaging. A quick trip to Nymeria, a few additional refineries, and the problem is solved. Smooth plastic production resumes. Now, about our power situation. The factory's maximum consumption is creeping dangerously close to our total output. Fortunately, we unlocked the geothermal generators a while back in the MAM Caterium tree, so it's time to put them to use. Conveniently, there are geysers located along the highway between Manufactoria and Nymeria. We lay down some foundation over the geyser and install our first geothermal generator. It generates power in a fluctuating range from 100 to 300 megawatts. While the variability isn't ideal, it's incredibly easy to set up and just plug it into the grid. In the area we find 5 more geysers. Setting up generators on all of them smooths out the fluctuations, especially the pure nodes, which range from 200 to 600 megawatts. Combined, these generators provide roughly 1000 megawatts of reliable power, a modest boost, but for the effort required it's free energy and I'm happy to take it. With the plastic production back on track, we unlock control system development milestone.
Milestone reached. Several parts more efficient and powerful than the human brain can now be made to compensate for many deficiencies otherwise encountered in future development efforts. The blender enables you to mix and/or combine parts and fluids for more complex recipes. Most importantly, project part number 6, the assembly director system, should be produced and delivered to the space elevator as soon as possible.
This introduces the blender, a complex building capable of handling 2 solid and 2 liquid inputs simultaneously. It's essentially a more intricate refinery, and it marks the beginning of a whole new level of manufacturing challenges. We take a little break from factory management and explore the world to enjoy the scenery, or in this case, gather some summer sloop. After collecting 12 summer sloop and a few Mercer spheres, we're ready to expand our factory further. Remember the alien power augmenter we unlocked earlier in the map? Well, we finally have enough summer sloop to build one. True to its promise, it boosts power output by 10% once connected to the grid. It even has an input port to increase this percentage further, though we're really far from producing the alien power matrices required to fuel it. Next, we unlock the production amplifier in the alien tech tree.
Production amplifier unlocked. Every single manufacturing and smelting building will be backwards compatible with this new technology. These buildings can now have a summer sloop embedded to increase resource output without requiring more input, at the cost of greatly increased power consumption.
Flow cycles within flow cycles make explosions into temples into explosions into temples.
Ada explains that we can feed summer sloop directly into production machines to boost output without increasing input, albeit at the cost of higher power consumption. That sounds super helpful. Turning our attention to the hub, we see that unlocking further milestones requires radio control units and supercomputers. We opt to start with supercomputers, since we have an empty manufacturer row on the 6th floor of our main factory ready to go. Supercomputers, as expected, are incredibly resource intensive. Each unit requires an absurd amount of computers per minute, along with AI limiters, high-speed connectors, and a significant supply of plastic. At this point, our factory's throughput can barely sustain a single manufacturer. We begin by scaling up computer production, expanding to 4 assemblers in total. This leads to downstream shortages in circuit boards and crystal oscillators, both crucial for computer manufacturing. To meet demand, we need to double circuit board production, which requires more copper sheets and plastic. Checking on copper sheet production first, we find it insufficient for the additional circuit assemblers. We resolve this by adding more constructors to boost output. Meanwhile, plastic production is also lagging behind. To address the plastic shortfall, we head over to Nymeria to claim a new oil node. We set up an extractor, merge its output into the existing oil pipeline, and upgrade the Line 2 Mark II. With the increased crude oil supply, we double our plastic production with 5 new refineries. This also necessitates additional petroleum coke refineries to manage the byproduct. With the extra plastic and copper sheets, we finally produce enough circuit boards to sustain our computer assemblers. Now for the other half of the equation, crystal oscillators. Each manufacturer only produces 1 per minute, and our 2 existing manufacturers simply aren't cutting it. We expand the crystal oscillator production line to meet demand. Their inputs are challenging as well, requiring crystal quartz, cable, and reinforced iron plate. Luckily, our factory already supplies a surplus of reinforced iron plates, so no adjustments are needed there, just update the notes. Cables, however, is a bottleneck, leaving us with only 0.5 surplus per minute. Crystal quartz remains adequate, as it's not heavily utilized elsewhere, but with these adjustments, our expanded computer production can finally run smoothly. With 1 supercomputer input sorted, we move on to the rest, starting with high-speed connectors. We double the production here as well, but that requires more quick-wire, cable, and circuit boards. While circuit boards remains in surplus, the increased cable demands creates a deficit. To resolve this, we redirect a full Mark IV belt of wires upstairs to bolster cable production, meeting demand for now. Quickwire is another issue. We add 4 more constructors and upgrade the quickwire belt to Mark V to ensure sufficient throughput for the high-speed connectors. Going back to the copper sheet production, we discovered that the copper ingot output is now insufficient. We need to merge these two old copper belts to feed a full Mark IV belt into the smelters. Now we can add 8 more smelters to the array, which increases the copper ingot production to 480 per minute, finally supporting our expanded operations. With all the inputs upgraded, we built the 4 components into our supercomputer manufacturer. The built spaghetti on the manufacturer floor is tangled as ever, but fortunately this is the last machine on the floor. After some effort, the supercomputers begin producing. We box them up in our main storage hub, marking the completion of our first tier 7 component. That wasn't too bad, right? To boost supercomputer production, we use our one remaining summer loop. While it takes 4 summer loop to double the output, a single one does provide a 25% increase, which we're happy to take. Every little bit counts at this point. With the stockpile of supercomputers ready, we unlock the tier 8 milestone nuclear power.
Milestone reached. The nuclear power plant produces dangerous radioactive nuclear waste. FICSIT reminds you that any extra limbs resulting from exposure to radiation are also contracted to work on project assembly. FICSIT also reminds you that willful exposure to radiation will not result in any bonuses regardless of how many functional limbs it produces. Project part number 7, the magnetic field generator, should enter production as soon as possible. Any unnecessary delays will be noted.
Ada warns us that nuclear power is highly complex and intimidating, so we decide to postpone it for now. Instead, we shift our focus to radio control units, or RCUs. We set up a new manufacturing room above our aluminum production and place a manufacturer for RCUs. These require aluminum casing, crystal oscillators, and oh no, more computers, which means more crystal oscillators. Time for another round of expansion. We add 2 more manufacturers to our crystal oscillator line, bringing us to 5 total. This creates a deficit in reinforced iron plates, so we add 2 additional assemblers to cover the shortfall. Luckily, we have enough iron plates and wire to support this expansion for now. Unfortunately, cable production is once again a bottleneck, with a deficit of 5 cables per minute. For now, we choose to ignore this issue as 100 cables are currently being allocated to the space elevator's automated wiring component, which isn't in use. Consider it a problem for a future data engineer to solve. On the quartz crystal front, we're producing the exact 90 units required for our oscillator line, so no changes are needed here for now. But then we go and review our computer production and we realize we're still underproducing oscillators, so we expand again, adding 2 more manufacturers for a total of 7. This requires doubling the quartz production to 180 units per minute, but fortunately it's a straightforward fix. With the expanded setup, we barely meet the requirements to support the RCU manufacturer. Next, we focus on the logistics, transferring materials from the old factory to the new section. We follow a consistent pattern. Using smart splitters at the storage hub, we route materials into the subfloor, then transport them across the factory to the new section. Crystal oscillators and computers are routed via this method, while aluminum casing are easily delivered from the floor below. Once connected, the RCU manufacturer springs to life and we've automated our second tier 7 component. The finished RCUs are sent to a new storage area near the aluminum products to be stockpiled for future milestones and future projects. The final tier 7 milestone is the hazmat suit, which requires 50 gas filters. A quick trip to Nymeria yields a box of synthetic fabric that we automated earlier, allowing us to manually craft the filters at the equipment workshop. Once complete, we unlock the milestone and finish tier 7.
Milestone reached. The hazmat suit protects the wearer from radiation by consuming iodine-infused filters. You may find this protection essential if you are going to finally get around to saving humanity. I previously gave you compliments in an attempt to inspire you, but it might have given you the wrong idea. I will definitely be totally honest with you from this moment on. Here is a demonstration of a truthful compliment. That suit looks like it was made for you. Because it was.
The hazmat suit equipped with iodine-infused filters protects us from radiation. While we're not ready to tackle nuclear power just yet, we craft the suit in preparation for future needs. A quick test confirms that it works perfectly, consuming filters as it shields us from radiation. While exploring, we gather more summer sloop to boost complex part production. Returning to the factory, we stockpiled a bunch of RCUs now, so we use them to unlock aeronautical engineering, gaining access to drones.
Milestone reached. Drones provide automated low-capacity aerial transport between drone stations. Stations need to be supplied with any kind of fuel for the drones to function. FICSIT had several restrictions in place prohibiting creative use of drones. I have since removed those because I think no pioneer would ever misuse FICSIT property right under their noses. Especially since everything is recorded.
The drone ports are enormous. The drone's storage grid seems quite small and they require fuel, leaving us pretty uncertain about their immediate use. However, we're optimistic that they'll play a key role in our logistics down the line. With RCUs finally in place, unlocking the advanced aluminum production milestone becomes effortless.
Milestone reached. The resource well pressurizer and extractor can harvest nitrogen, crude oil, and water from underground wells. Nitrogen, being a gas, does not need pumps for pipeline transportation. FICSIT does not process most of your metrics, but I do. According to FICSIT predictions, you are exploiting this planet with unexpected efficiency. They did always struggle to see the true potential of things. Nothing about you is unexpected to me, and therefore you are performing exactly as expected.
This milestone introduces nitrogen gas, a crucial component for crafting fused modular frames in a blender, and we're ready to dive in. To bring nitrogen into our factory, the first step is building a road to a nearby nitrogen geyser. Luckily, it's not too far from home, so paving a path is straightforward. Since only trains can transport fluids and gases, we construct a station at the geyser site and lay down rails following the newly built road, connecting it all back to our base. Once home, we face the challenge of our increasingly cramped base, prompting us to embrace verticality yet again. We construct a new platform above an existing station and start designing an unloading point for the nitrogen. Elevating the rails to reach the station requires some creative problem solving, but by stacking the blueprints for higher supports, we successfully link it to the main track. To ground the floating structure visually, we add concrete pillars and supportive elements for a touch of realism. With the stations connected, it's time to bring in the train and test the track. Now the train just needs something to carry. At the nitrogen geyser, we begin laying foundation and preparing the setup. Extracting nitrogen involves a resource well pressurizer to force the gas from its satellite nodes. Each node requires a resource well extractor, and with Mark II pipelines capable of transporting 600 units, we decide to install 5 extractors, each producing 120 units. Connecting them all with pipes proves a bit chaotic since we don't have a polished design for this yet, but eventually everything flows smoothly to the train's liquid freight platform. And with that, nitrogen gas is officially part of our factory's resources. Back in the aluminum section of our factory, we set up a blender next to the RCU manufacturer to craft these new fused modular frames. These require heavy modular frames, a hefty supply of aluminum casing, and of course nitrogen gas. Checking in on heavy modular frame production reveals that we're slightly underproducing, but it's not a pressing issue as their main use, assembling ACUs for the space elevator, isn't active at the moment. This definitely sounds like a problem for a future data engineer to tackle. Aluminum casing production looks fine at the moment with enough output to allocate 75 units to the blender and keep 25 as a surplus for storage. Next we focus on routing the inputs. Aluminum casing are conveniently located just downstairs, so that's an easy fix. We use the underfloor pattern to bring in the heavy modular frames from across the factory. The nitrogen gas pipeline is a bit trickier. Pipes run outside the walls, down to the subfloor, and across to the nitrogen train station. From there, it's just a matter of connecting the pipes to bring the nitrogen into the blender. With everything in place, the blender hums to life, producing fused modular frames at last. These frames serve both construction and milestone goals, so we need to set up a storage box to stockpile them. To speed things up, we use our collection of summer sloop, doubling production speed to 3 frames per minute without requiring any additional materials. While waiting for the frames to accumulate, we take the moment to improve the base's aesthetics, adding some signs to storage boxes to make it easier to identify their contents at a glance. Soon enough, we hit our target of 50 frames and unlock leading edge production milestones.
The Miner Mark III provides top-of-the-line resource extraction potential, making it even easier to contribute to project assembly. Project part number 8, the thermal propulsion rocket, is the most complex project part of this phase as it requires turbo motors and thus requires your best. FICSIT didn't think pioneers such as you could get this far. I am glad we have both proven them wrong.
For reasons I can't quite explain, an intrusive thought urges me to ride the hub shuttle during the milestone delivery. Let's just say, never again. On the bright side, we now have access to Miner Mark III, capable of mining at double the rate of its predecessor. Perfect for tackling those resource bottlenecks that have been slowing us down. To craft the Miner Mark III, we need turbo motors, a newly unlocked component that combines familiar items like rubber, RCUs, and motors with a new requirement, cooling systems. These systems are made in blenders and they require heat sinks, rubber, water, and nitrogen gas. Producing heat sinks alone demands copper and aluminum sheets, making the entire process quite involved. We've got our work cut out for us. We begin by expanding the aluminum processing area to include a dedicated space for heatsink production. A pair of assemblers handle the task, with aluminum sheets coming from the expanded production line and copper sheets sourced from the 4 new assemblers added to meet increased demand. As usual, the subfloor conveyor system ensures all materials flow seamlessly to their destination. Once the inputs are connected, heatsink production is fully automated. Above the heatsink floor, we construct a new room, 4 walls high to accommodate blenders for cooling systems. With its need for 2 solid and 2 fluid inputs, it's finally time to create a dedicated blender blueprint. The pre-configured input and output make installation smooth and consistent. Using the blueprint, placing the blender is straightforward, and we set it up to produce cooling systems. Beside our new blender, we place our manufacturer and designate it to make our desired component, the turbo motor. Now it's time to start crunching the numbers. Since one blender makes 6 per minute and we need 7.5, we add a second blender, underclocking both to produce exactly 3.75 each. The next step is securing water, a deceptively simple yet logistically tricky resource. Conveniently, a water geyser lies directly below our main factory. Using the same pressurizer and extractor system as with nitrogen, we pipe the water up to the main base and then into the cooling system blender. Wall holes guide the pipes neatly through the subfloor, connecting the water and nitrogen to the production line. The heatsinks from below are then lifted into the blender, leaving just one remaining input. Rubber is the last component for the cooling system and is also a critical ingredient for turbo motors. We set up a buffer box beneath the train station connected to Nymeria, splitting off a line of rubber into the subfloor and directing it to the blender. With all the inputs in place, the cooling systems spring to life, bringing us one step closer to turbo motors. Next, we turn our attention to assembling the turbo motors. The cooling systems are bolted directly into the adjacent manufacturer, while a split line from the rubber supply ensures consistent input. RCUs are simple enough as they are being produced in the room next door. Motors are a little bit more tricky as they are being stored across the other side of the factory, so we use our same system to bring them out of the storage container and out through a splitter into the subfloor. With all 4 components feeding into the manufacturer, turbo motors production begins. To speed up output, we use the last of our summer sloop to increase the production temporarily. However, a bottleneck forms with RCUs, creating a catch-22. We need more turbo motors to produce the Miner Mark III, which is essential to scaling RCU production. For now, we let the turbo motors trickle in at their current pace, stockpiling them in preparation for the upgrades ahead. Now that we have access to turbo motors and Miner Mark IIIs, we can focus on fixing some of our production bottlenecks, starting with the RCUs. We start by adding a second RCU manufacturer and try to double our output. With the second manufacturer and the first manufacturer boosted by Somersloop, our target output is 7.5 RCUs per minute, but we need to supply the aluminum casing, crystal oscillators, and computers to support 2 manufacturers. First, we head over to our old assembler floor and add 2 computer assemblers. To support these new computer assemblers, as well as the RCU manufacturers, we're going to need so many more crystal oscillator manufacturers. We decide to bite the bullet and add 5 more to our existing 7. Here's what a row of 12 manufacturers looks like. They stick out like a sore thumb on our manufacturing floor. But aesthetics aside, we need to work on their inputs. We need 2 more assemblers to make reinforced iron plates, bringing us to 10 plate assemblers, pushing a whopping 56.25 reinforced iron plates per minute. Unfortunately, this means we aren't producing enough regular iron plates to support them. Our iron plate constructors are already consuming all the ingots that we're producing, so this means we need to upgrade the entire line all the way back to iron ore. We add some power shards to the miners supplying this line of ore to upgrade them to Mark 4 or 480 per minute. With 480 ore, we need to double our smelters to produce 480 ingots as well, which can now support 16 constructors making 320 iron plates per minute, more than enough to support our new appetite for reinforced iron plates. Copper wire, the other ingredient for our stitched iron plate recipe, is also undersupplied. We trace the entire copper process back to ore, upgrading all the belts and lifts to Mark 5. It's time to put our new miner Mark 3 to use to meet this Mark 5 throughput. With Mark 3 miners, each one of these nodes is now producing a whopping 240 copper ore per minute, and we have 3, so by clocking 1 to 150%, we get our full 780 Mark 5 belt of copper ore. We head back to our base, double up our smelters, and turn all that ore into ingots, and now we have a whopping 780 copper ingots to turn into wire. While we already have an entire factory room dedicated to making wire, we need to double it up. We now have 2 belts of Mark 5 copper wire, hopefully enough to sustain us for the near distant future, and definitely enough for feeding the reinforced iron plate assemblers we added. In fact, we've killed 2 birds with 1 stone, because the next component for oscillators is cable, which we've been undersupplying due to a lack of wire. With our new Mark 5 belt of wire, we can now clock all our cable constructors to 100% and even overclock one of them to consume the full belt of wire, making 390 cable per minute. Next up is quartz crystal, again. We add another handful of constructors to bring quartz crystal production up to 270, 216 of which is being consumed by our oscillators. With that, all 12 of our crystal oscillator machines were to life, fixing a critical bottleneck in our factory. Next is circuit boards. We need to add another pair of assemblers to meet demand. However, that means we once again don't have enough copper sheets. So naturally, we add some more copper sheet constructors. Things are getting pretty ridiculous now, so we even add some little signs on each set of 4 machines to make counting them a bit easier. But more sheets means we need more ingots, so we need to upgrade our other line of copper to Mark 5 as well. A tedious but worthwhile exercise, because hopefully we have enough copper production going forward. The next component for circuit boards is plastic. With the increased production, we are in a slight plastic deficit. Being the lazy engineer I am, instead of adding more plastic refineries, opt to turn the polymer resin that we're currently sinking into residual plastic. We add 3 refineries next to our synthetic fabric refinery for a quick boost of 60 plastic per minute. When we inspect our computer assemblers, we notice that they aren't being fully supplied with oscillators, even though we're producing enough. This is due to the fact that we're using a manifold instead of a balanced splitter. With manifolds, the previous machine's input needs to be fully saturated before the next machine will receive enough input for continuous production. To speed this process up, we add 3 more oscillator manufacturers to oversupply the oscillators, since we have all the downstream materials in excess now. With computers and crystal oscillators now finally producing in sufficient volume, we can turn our attention to aluminum once again. We aren't producing enough ingots. We head to our aluminum outpost to boost production. I made the stupid decision of trying to boost the output to a full Mark 5 belt of aluminum ingots. This turned out to be a huge mistake, since all the processes require more fluid than a Mark 2 pipe can carry, so we had to split the process into 2 different sets of pipes and belts. The whole process took a couple of hours of hardcore maths and headaches, but we do eventually get our full Mark 5 belt of aluminum ingots, which should sustain all our future production needs, so I suppose it was worth it? But with all that aluminum ingot, we can now produce a total 240 aluminum casing, which is more than enough to feed our 2 RCU manufacturers. During all that time we spent upgrading our factory to Mark 5, turbo motors and fuse frames have finished stockpiling up, so we can now finally unlock the final Tier 8 milestone, particle enrichment.
Milestone reached. Project part number 9, nuclear pasta, can be created in the particle accelerator. The accelerator has vast and fluctuating power demands, depending on the recipe, so will need careful integration with your factory. FICSIT does not waste, so nuclear waste can be refined by the particle accelerator into plutonium for reuse in the nuclear power plant. Fun fact: FICSIT psychologists suggest factory designs reflect the minds of their creators in unexpected ways. On an unrelated note, your infrastructural choices have been interesting.
With all our recent expansions, the factory's blue max consumption line has now surpassed our power production's capacity, a precarious and unsustainable situation. While the allure of jumping straight into nuclear power is tempting, it's unclear whether we even have enough energy reserves to build the infrastructure needed for such a complex undertaking. As a temporary solution, we decide to lean on turbo fuel power generators instead. Turbo fuel isn't overly complicated to produce. It requires regular fuel mixed with compacted coal, which itself is made from sulfur and coal. Over at Nymeria, where our regular fuel generators are stationed, we scout the area for nearby coal and sulfur. While neither resource is terribly far, they aren't exactly close either, and the terrain isn't without its hazards. We locate the coal node first, carving out a foundation pathway back to Nymeria. After running power towers to the site, we set up a new miner. Sulfur proves trickier to reach, it's farther out and the journey is fraught with hostile flora and fauna. But persistence pays off, and eventually we establish a precarious route back towards the coal node and Nymeria, bridging gaps and taming the abyss with our foundations. To simplify logistics, we decide to use belts to transport the coal and sulfur back to base, ensuring an uninterrupted supply of materials for fuel production. With the resources en route, we begin setting up the turbo fuel factory. First, we need assemblers for compacted coal to make it out of sulfur and coal. Next, we need refineries to turn crude oil into regular fuel. And finally, we need another set of refineries to produce the turbo fuel. The process is straightforward, but demands precision to balance the inputs and outputs. We belt sulfur and coal into the compacted coal assemblers, and then run a pipeline from the fuel refineries to the newly tapped crude oil node. An oil extractor is installed, complete with pumps to maintain a steady flow. To manage the polymer resin byproduct from the fuel refineries, we connect an awesome sink to keep things simple. With the inputs ready, we pipe the regular fuel into the turbo fuel refineries and belt in the compacted coal. Powering everything up, we test the setup and confirm it works. Turbo fuel is flowing. Confident in our proof of concept, we scale up production to meet our needs. Given the limited space available, we decide to build 8 turbo fuel refineries, enough to support 16 generators with a small surplus. Additional assemblers and refineries are brought online to sustain this capacity. Once a turbo fuel line is running at scale, we route it towards an open area near our existing generators by the lake. There, we install 16 new fuel generators, hook them up to the turbo fuel line, and just like that, we've added a massive 4,000 megawatts to our power grid. With the small surplus of turbo fuel, we extend the pipeline to our fuel packaging area, repurposing one of the packages to handle turbo fuel instead. After tweaking the piping, we've created a game-changing addition, packaged turbo fuel for our jetpack. This upgrade sends us soaring, literally and figuratively, to new heights of efficiency and exploration. With an impressive 4,000 megawatts of power now at our disposal, it's finally time to tackle nuclear power. Setting up this system is no small feat. It's a complex process that centers around nuclear reactors, which burn uranium fuel rods to generate electricity. Creating these fuel rods involves combining electromagnetic control rods with encased uranium cells, and producing these components demands a vast array of materials, including stators, AI limiters, sulfuric acid, and many more. Tracing these requirements back reveal they rely on nearly every raw material in the game: copper, iron, caterium, concrete, you name it. But power generation isn't the only challenge. Burning uranium fuel rods produces radioactive waste, which must be dealt with. We can either store the waste indefinitely or convert it into plutonium using particle accelerators, a far more efficient solution, but one with its own labyrinth of production chains. To complicate matters further, uranium and anything derived from it is highly radioactive, meaning careful planning is essential when choosing processing locations. Faced with these challenges, there are two possible approaches. We can leverage the existing factory to produce the base components, or we can build entirely new infrastructure from the ground up. I opt for the latter, as I want my nuclear setup to remain independent of the factory's existing supply chains. The first step is to scout a suitable location. Nuclear reactors require an immense amount of water, so any viable site needs access to both uranium and a substantial water source. Eventually, I settle on the closest uranium node to our base, nestled in a cave we discovered at the very start of our journey. Conveniently, there's a sizable lake nearby which should suffice for the reactor's water demands. We begin by installing a miner on the uranium node within the cave, then running a lengthy conveyor belt from the cave to the lake. The local stingers understandably are unhappy with our industrial encroachment. They voice their displeasure. A brief exchange of bullets later, the project resumes without further interruptions. Next comes the placement of the reactors. Since the entire lake will be reserved for water extractors, we construct an elevated platform above the water. To ensure optimal efficiency, each reactor will need 2 water extractors. Using these extractor placements as alignment guides, we establish a layout for 4 nuclear reactors, a number chosen to test the system's capabilities. Now the focus shifts to designing the infrastructure needed for the complex production chain to fuel these reactors. With space at a premium, we decide to leverage the 5x5 Mark II blueprint designer unlocked earlier. Starting with a blank room blueprint, we create modular stackable designs that can house constructors, smelters, and assemblers. The blueprint ensures scalability, with rooms snapping together seamlessly while maintaining a clean and visually pleasing aesthetic. For the constructors, we create a specialized blueprint using the blank room as a template. The design fits 2 rows of 3 constructors on each side, with belts neatly integrated and a new input-output system that brings resources from above and below rather than through the walls. Once the belts, splitters, and mergers are in place, we add all the finishing touches, coloring the machines black and red for a sleek look and installing lights to brighten the workspace. With the constructor room blueprint finalized, we construct a 2-story building dedicated to concrete production. To link the levels, we manually install lifts through the floor openings, ensuring the input belts rise from a hidden subfloor to keep the setup tidy. Next, we search for a source of limestone to test our new design. As luck would have it, the nearest limestone node is frustratingly far away. Since the system is critical for power, we opt for a simple foolproof solution: conveyor belts. After installing a miner at the limestone nodes, we painstakingly run a long belt back to our nuclear processing town. Once the limestone is connected to the constructor room, we power everything up and verify the setup works. Just like that, we've automated our first material, concrete, and taken our first step towards harnessing nuclear power. We experiment with a new technique, using signs set to solid colors with maximum emission to create glowing bands of light between the floors. The effect is striking and adds a futuristic touch, but the effort involved is substantial. Knowing Ada would disapprove of this aesthetic detour, we refocus on the task at hand. Still, we can't resist adding a few signs to our first building, labeling their outputs and volumes to stay organized amidst this intricate production web. Sticking to our established process, we turn to the blueprint designer to draft the layout for a smelter room. It's similar to the constructor room, 4 smelters on each side with inputs and outputs neatly linked for vertical scalability. While working, we discover a handy trick. Changing the default swash to red and black instantly updates the color scheme across our entire factory. We set up the new smelter room beside the concrete constructors and assign it to produce caterium ingots. Conveniently, caterium is nearby, so we establish a miner and route the ore through the subfloor into the smelters. Soon, the machines come alive, churning out 80 caterium ingots per minute. With 2 rooms operational, our nuclear fuel processing sites began to resemble a bustling industrial town, where each building feels like its own specialty shop. It's a satisfying sight. Next, we place a constructor room adjacent to the caterium smelters, dedicating it to quick-wire production. Connecting the caterium smelter's output to the constructor's input via the subfloor is seamless. This layout is starting to grow on me. Our next material is copper, as we need copper sheets and wire. We place another smelter room but encounter a cliffside, forcing us to elevate this section. Luckily, the copper is conveniently located right in front of us. We set up a miner and belt the ore into the smelters. With 240 copper ingots per minute now available, we're ready to dive into copper product manufacturing. A new constructor room is established and assigned to copper sheet production. Hooking up the copper ingots through the subfloor, we bring the copper sheet products online without a hitch. Now it's time to tackle steel products. We design a foundry room through the blueprint machine. The design is similar to our smelter room, but with dual input requirements, it makes the belts a bit trickier to arrange. After some adjustments, we finalize the design and place a foundry room opposite to the main road, breaking up the linear arrangement of our town. For steel production, we need iron ore and coal. Coal is conveniently located along the limestone road, so we just need to establish a new mine and stack its belt above the limestone conveyor. Unfortunately, the iron is a bit further away. We carve a path, lay down the belts, and eventually transport both resources back to the nuclear town. Using lifts, we bring the materials into the subfloor and feed them into the foundry room, producing steel ingots. To make steel pipes for stators and steel beams for encased industrial beams, we set up 2 constructor rooms beside the foundry. Scaling up the steel ingot production is straightforward. We simply add a second floor to the foundry room, link the inputs and outputs, and the design scales vertically with ease. Splitting the steel ingots and routing them through the subfloor to the constructor room gives us 2 more essential components. Returning to the copper, we set up another constructor room for wire production. As before, we split the copper ingots and belt them in via the subfloor. With all the basics covered, it's time to move on to more advanced components. Back at the blueprint machine, we design an assembler room. The compact 5x5 layout accommodates 2 assemblers, which is plenty for now. We give the room a copper finish to visually distinguish it from the smelters and constructor rooms. On the other side of the road, we place the assembler room and assign it to produce AI limiters. Routing copper sheets and quick-wire through the subfloor gets tricky due to limited clearance between the terrain and the factory, but with some effort we get everything connected and the assemblers begin to produce AI limiters. Beside the AI limiter room, we add 2 more assembler floors to manufacture stators. Connecting the belts between floors, we route in the wire and steel pipes, completing the stator production process. With both AI limiters and stators ready, we have all the necessary components for electromagnetic control rods. Finally, we set up the assembler room to assemble the rods, belting in the stators and AI limiters. Just like that, we've created our first critical component for uranium fuel rods. Now we need to set up another assembler room to produce the encased industrial beams. With the steel beams right across the road, routing them in is pretty straightforward. Concrete, on the other hand, is a bit farther away. But after some creative belt work, it too finds its way to the assembler. Next, we adapt our empty room template to accommodate manufacturers and blenders by increasing it to 4 floors. To set it apart, we're giving this building a striking Caterium gold finish. The compact 5x5 footprint can fit only 1 manufacturer or blender, but by combining 2 rooms into a 5x10 layout, we managed to fit 2 blenders side by side. These blenders are set up to produce encased uranium cells, one of the vital components for uranium fuel rods. The cells require uranium, concrete, and sulfuric acid as inputs. Behind the encased uranium cell room, we extend the design with 2 more 5x5 rooms, creating space for manufacturers to craft uranium fuel rods. Dropping 2 manufacturers, we link their inputs using floor holes to keep the layout clean and organized. Manufacturers can have up to 4 inputs, so connecting everything gets a bit tricky. We head to the subfloor and tackle the messy belt work to feed in components like concrete, electromagnetic rods, and encased beams. While we also need uranium, activating the mine now would irradiate the whole area, so we run a placeholder belt for the moment. With concrete routed into the encased uranium cell blenders and a placeholder uranium belt in place, the next challenge is sulfuric acid. Sulfur, the key ingredient, is located far from our site, near the limestone and iron belts. We set up a miner and belt the sulfur back to base, where we carve out some space for refineries, leaving room for future expansion. Right next to the sulfuric acid refinery, we install blenders for nitric acid, which will also be crucial for processing plutonium later. Since both sulfuric and nitric acid require water, we create a shared water pipeline to streamline the process. Nitric acid also needs iron plates, so we quickly drop a smelter and constructor room across the road. With such a small demand for iron plates, we simply borrow some from the foundry's belt, run it under the floor, and connect it to the nitric acid blender. Sulfur for the sulfuric acid refinery takes a longer, messier journey. While we do try our best to keep the subfloor belts tidy, the beauty of the subfloor is that it hides the chaos. As long as everything clicks into place at the refinery, we're good to go. Next, we turn to water and nitrogen extraction. Fortunately, there are geysers right beneath us. For water, we replicate the pressurized fracking setup from our main base, piping it into our shared water line. This gets the sulfuric acid refinery online. The sulfuric acid is then piped into the encased uranium cell blenders. Since the blending process produces sulfuric acid as a byproduct, we install junctions and valves to prioritize the byproduct, ensuring the system runs smoothly. Nitrogen extraction is a simpler task. With the pressurizer in place, we only need one extractor running at 120 nitrogen per minute, more than enough for our needs. With all the components in place, the uranium fuel rod manufacturer is complete. We route the rods from the manufacturer under the subfloor to the reactors. A splitter manifold ensures even distribution across all 4 reactors. At the same time, we set up return belts to handle the uranium waste, sending it back to the factory for further processing. Although we could activate the uranium mine now and power the reactors, without a way to process the waste into plutonium, we'd quickly be overwhelmed. For that, we need silica to mix with the waste to create non-fissile uranium. We set up a constructor room to process quartz into silica. Borrowing quartz from the same mine that supplies the main base, we run a long belt through the nuclear town and feed the silica constructors. To process non-fissile uranium, we install 2 new 5x5 rooms for blenders. While only one blender, clocked to 64%, is needed to handle all the waste, we keep the room for future expansion. The blenders also require nitric acid and sulfuric acid, conveniently produced right next door, so we extend the pipes. As a byproduct, the process generates water, which we route back into the main water pipeline to prevent the machine backing up. Our journey continues with the particle accelerators, the next critical step in our nuclear setup. These massive machines need cooling systems as part of their construction material. While we're already producing them, there's one glaring issue: we're not storing them. A quick trip back to Manufactoria fixes that with the addition of a simple storage box. Back in Nuclear Town, it's time to set up the particle accelerator. These machines are nothing short of colossal and guzzle power like no tomorrow, fluctuating between 270 to 750 megawatts. We configure it to produce plutonium pellets, which require uranium waste and non-fissile uranium that we prepared earlier. As usual, we run the inputs through the subfloor system, splitting off the uranium waste and bringing in the non-fissile uranium seamlessly. Next, we design an assembler room to transform concrete and plutonium pellets into encased plutonium cells. A new conveyor belt from the particle accelerator delivers the pellets, while we split the concrete off from our existing processes to feed the assembler. Moving on, we set up another assembler room to produce alclad aluminum sheets, essential for heat sinks needed in the plutonium fuel rods. Our aluminum ingot factory isn't too far, just over in the Pink Forest. Initially, I thought drones might be perfect for transporting these materials, but a lack of advanced fuel production in either the aluminum site or nuclear town made that impractical. Instead, we resort to our trusty old belt. We split off aluminum ingots at the source and run a belt all the way back to nuclear town, scaling the tallest vertical conveyor I've ever built. From there, the materials are fed into the aluminum sheet assembler along with copper ingots. With aluminum sheets ready, we extend the foundations around the back and construct another assembler room for heat sinks. These require aluminum sheets and copper sheets, both of which we already have. After a bit of belting, heat sink production is up and running. Finally, the stage is set for the grand finale, constructing a manufacturer for plutonium fuel rods. These require encased plutonium cells, steel beams, electromagnetic control rods, and heat sinks. After painstakingly assembling and preparing each component, we built everything into the manufacturer. With that, our intricate nuclear power production line is officially complete. To consume these new fuel rods, we need more reactors. Returning to the lake, we clear some space by setting up a placeholder water extractor for future uranium reactors. But at the end of the process, we install 2 new nuclear reactors for plutonium fuel rods, adding a third belt to carry the fuel rods to their destination. But there's more to it than that. Plutonium reactors generate waste as well, though only at 0.1 units per minute, a fraction of the waste the uranium reactors generate. This manageable volume means we can just store it in a couple of industrial containers, which will take hundreds of hours to fill. With the nuclear process now complete, we're almost ready to activate the uranium mine. However, this will turn the entire area radioactive. Thankfully, we have the hazmat suit, but it relies on iodine filters. These filters require fabric, which isn't easy to fully automate. Instead, we opt for semi-automation. By placing a dimensional depot in Nymeria to store the synthetic fabric, we can access it from anywhere. Using this setup, we automate the production of regular gas filters. Fabric goes into a storage container, which we can fill up manually from our dimensional storage, while coal and iron plates are belted in from existing factories. The gas filters are then fed into a second manufacturer along with aluminum casing and quickwire to create iodine-infused filters. Naturally, we store these in another dimensional depot for easy access whenever radiation protection is needed. At last, we're ready to power up the uranium miner and let the uranium flow. Surprisingly, the radiation isn't as overwhelming as I expected. With the uranium in motion, the encased uranium cell blender roars to life. Soon, the uranium fuel rod manufacturer joins in, producing our very first fuel rods. They glide down the belts and into the reactors, and just like that, we've achieved nuclear power. To ensure everything runs smoothly, we double check the waste management system. The uranium waste is indeed flowing back into the system, being converted into non-fissile uranium and plutonium pellets. However, the manifold is slow and the fuel cell production is causing delays in saturating the reactors with fuel. To speed things up, we temporarily overclock the fuel rod and encased cell machines. Eventually, the uranium waste is even converted into plutonium fuel rods, bringing the additional 2 plutonium reactors online. Together, they generate an impressive 14,000 megawatts of additional power. With all that power at our disposal, it's time to dive back into Project Assembly Phase 4. Our first component that we want to get going is the Assembly Director System. We're building a new floor above our aluminum factory for this, and it only requires 2 inputs, Adaptive Control Units or ACUs for short, and supercomputers. Thankfully, the quantities aren't too high. That said, we're running into an issue. Our heavy modular frame production isn't keeping up with the volume of ACUs that we need. This has been a problem for a while, and frankly, the previous data engineer dropped the ball on this one. Now it's up to us to fix it. We need to add a second manufacturer and hook up the belts to meet demand. But here's the catch. The input for heavy modular frames isn't simple. We'll need to ramp up production of modular frames, steel plates, encased beams, and even screws. To make more steel pipes and encased beams, we'll need to upgrade our steel production to Mark V. Let's trace the iron ore belts again and upgrade all the miners to Mark III. We'll overclock one of them to output the full 780 iron ore needed to fully saturate a Mark V belt. Coal's a bit easier. We can just toss some power shards into the miner and clock it to 780. With raw material sorted, we'll expand our foundries to process everything into a full Mark V belted steel ingots. Next we head upstairs to add more constructors for steel beams and pipes. With enough steel, we're finally producing enough encased industrial beams and steel pipes, and we're also producing enough modular frames for our heavy modular frame process. The last hurdle is screws. Our screw production was limited by the belts, only producing 240 with a Mark III. But now, with a Mark V belt, we can easily double that output. That should cover the requirements to make 4 heavy modular frames per minute, plenty for our ACU demand. We need 1.5 ACUs per minute to complete the Assembly Director System, so we've clocked both our manufacturers to 75%. There's no need to overproduce. The other input we need is supercomputers. We're not making many, but since they're not being used elsewhere, we don't actually need to expand production just yet. With everything in place, we're ready to transport these components to the other side of the factory. After some thought, we decide to send them across via a skybridge. This will most likely come in handy later when we need to move all of the space elevator components from this side of the factory to the other side for phase 4, as everything that's currently being produced on the 5th and 6th floors of the old factory will probably be used in future processes. Much easier to transport everything through the skybridge than running it all down into the subfloor. We tested out by sending supercomputers and ACUs across the new skybridge into the assemblers making the Assembly Director systems. We hook up the power and the machines spring to life. And just like that, we're making our first phase 4 component. We haven't decided where to place the space elevator yet, but for now, we'll just store these components in a box while we tackle the rest. Next up is our second component, the magnetic field generator. These are made in assemblers, requiring versatile framework and electromagnetic control rods. We're pretty familiar with EM rods by now, so we just need to bring a stator belt and we bring that across via the skybridge, and we grab the AI limiters out of their storage, send it through the subfloor and bring them into the assemblers to produce EM rods. Looking at our old versatile framework assemblers for Space Elevator Phase 2, we're producing enough, so it's just a matter of transporting them up to the skybridge and across to the new factory. And just like that, the magnetic field generators start rolling off the line, surprisingly easy. We'll store them in a box for now. Our third component is the Thermal Propulsion Rocket, or the TPR for short. These are a bit more complicated, requiring modular engines, turbo motors, cooling systems, and fused modular frames, basically everything we've recently made. We set up a manufacturer for the TPR recipe and get to work. Thanks to our summer sloop, we're actually good on turbo motors. We're producing 3.281 per minute, though we only need 1. Our fused modular frame output is solid as well. We're producing 3 per minute and we only need 1 for the TPR. Cooling systems, however, are a different story. We've got 2 blenders clocked to 75%, but we'll need to push them to 100% to meet demand. Modular engines are a whole nother issue. We had 1 manufacturer making 1 per minute, but we need 2.5. So we need to add 2 more machines and clock one of them to 50%. The input for these aren't simple either. They need motors, rubber, and smart plating. We're already producing the 5 motors needed, but we want some surplus, so we ramp one of our machines to 100% and aim for 7.5 motors per minute. This means we also need to boost our stator production. We just toss in a power shard and overclock one of our stator assemblers to 150% as we have the steel pipe and the wire to support it. But motors also need rotors, and we're underproducing those too. So we upgrade all the downstream production of iron rods and screws to Mark V. First, we need to double our smelters to produce a full Mark V belt of iron ingots. Then, we expand the iron rod constructors to a full Mark V belt of rods. At this point, we're seriously considering an alternate recipe for rods. This is really getting out of hand. With all the rods, we can finally upgrade our screw production to meet the rotor demand. Next, we check in on rubber. Our sign at the train station tells us that we're producing plenty, so no action needed, just a quick note. For our final component, smart plating. We have 2 assemblers making 4 per minute, but we need 5. Rather than adding more machines, we simply just overclock one with a power shard, and there's no need to increase the downstream throughput. Now that all 4 components for the TP are being produced at the required throughput, we can belt them into the manufacturer. With everything in place, the machine hums to life, and we'll store the output in a box for now. That's 3 out of our 4 phase 4 components done. Our last component is nuclear pasta. No idea why we need degenerate matter from a neutron star to save humanity, but Ada asked for it and we shall deliver. These are made in a particle accelerator using pressure cubes and copper powder, both new to us. We set up a new floor with assemblers to produce pressure conversion cubes. We only need 1 assembler clocked to 50%, which means we only require 1 RCU per minute and half a fused modular frame per minute. Thankfully, we're already producing enough of both, so it's just a matter of bringing them up from the lower floors and connecting them to the new assembler. The other component for nuclear pasta is 100 copper powder per minute. To produce that, we need a staggering 600 copper ingots per minute. We obviously don't have that kind of supply in our current setup, so we need to find a new node. Luckily, there's a normal quality copper node right next to our coal power plant near Manufactoria. We set up a miner, overclock it with shards, and start laying down foundation for a new factory section. It's more efficient to process the copper on site and transport 100 copper powder rather than 600 copper ingots. We add 2 rows of 10 smelters to process the copper ore into ingots. After installing all the belts and the power connections, we run the copper ore via the subfloor. Upstairs, we set up 2 constructors to turn the ingots into the 100 copper powder we need. To bring the powder back to base, there's a convenient road overhead. We use inverse ramps to smooth out the incline underneath and lay a belt from our new copper powder factory all the way back to base. With the components ready, we can now set up the particle accelerator to produce nuclear pasta. Since we probably won't need more than 1 of these, we don't need to worry too much about scalability. We bring in the copper powder via a lift from the subfloor and feed the pressure cubes via a conveyor wall to the accelerator. After powering it up, we begin the slow process of producing nuclear pasta. Now that all the components for phase 4 are in production, we can finally drop the space elevator onto the roof and belt in all 4 components. We dismantle the temporary storage boxes housing the assembly director systems, magnetic field generators and TPRs, and send them up directly to the space elevator. The nuclear pasta is sent around the back of the elevator, and everything flows smoothly as we slowly but steadily deliver all the components for Project Assembly Phase 4. As we wait for the delivery of the Phase 4 components, we take a break to venture out in search of hard drives. Alternative recipes could give us a significant edge as we move forward. Armed and ready, we carve our way through the local wildlife, navigating to crash drop pods and supplying the power or materials necessary to unlock their secrets. While scavenging, we also dive into the MAM and unlock some exciting tech from the sulfur tree, rocket fuel and turbo rifle ammo.
Turbo rifle ammo unlocked. The pioneer ammo of choice when obstacles are numerous and time is short. Panic and imminent death often negatively affect human accuracy, so this ammo meets the human experience with FICSIT efficiency.
Both sound invaluable for future expeditions. Rocket fuel crafted from turbo fuel and nitric acid presents a logistical puzzle. While we could produce nitric acid in Nymeria where the turbo fuel is being made, transporting the turbo fuel to Manufactoria feels like the smarter choice since we'll need it for turbo rifle ammo as well. To make this work, we need to extend our train station, adding a liquid freight platform to handle the turbo fuel. A quick adjustment at Nymeria station completes the setup. With transportation sorted, it's time to increase the turbo fuel production. Space at the turbo fuel factory is tight, so we opt for efficiency, overclocking each refinery with a few power shards to double their output. We expand the compacted coal assemblers and fuel refineries to match this new demand. Once everything is flowing smoothly, we pipe the turbo fuel into the freight platform and we're ready for delivery. Back at the factory, we carve out a spot to set up our first blender, tasked with producing turbo rifle ammo. We run a long pipe through the subfloor to bring turbo fuel from the station, and we pull regular rifle ammo from our old assemblers. Then we split the aluminum casing from a nearby belt feeding the iodine-infused filter line, and with all the inputs connected, turbo rifle ammo is officially in our arsenal. Of course, we're super eager to test it out. At first glance, its performance seems a bit underwhelming. A large magazine of 75 rounds, but surprisingly slow fire rate. There has to be more to it, right? Next up is nitric acid production, something we've tackled before in Nuclear Town. The process involves extending pipelines under the factory to bring water and nitrogen gas to the new setup. It's a messy job, but nothing we can't handle. Iron plates already used in the gas filter line are conveniently close enough to belt over. Once turbo fuel and nitric acid are ready, we blend them to create rocket fuel. The process yields compacted coal as a byproduct, but we simply sink that to keep things moving. To use rocket fuel in our jetpacks, we're going to need to package it in gas canisters, which are made from aluminum ingots. The problem? Our aluminum ingots are located on the farthest edge of the factory. Instead of belting them across the entire factory, we turn to drones for a solution. We split the aluminum ingots from the truck stop, and we also get fuel from that same truck stop using a splitter. Now our drone stations are ready to ferry materials from this side to the other side of the factory. With the drones operational, we feed the aluminum ingots into a constructor to craft empty canisters. These are then belted into a packager where they meet rocket fuel to create packaged rocket fuel. The result is phenomenal. Rocket fuel isn't just fuel, it's a game changer. It launches us sky high at exhilarating speeds, although it's dangerously easy to forget you'll need some left for a safe landing. Packaged rocket fuel also allows us to unlock the final fuel type, ionized fuel. Unfortunately, we're still missing the tech to produce it, but it's something to look forward to.
Ionized fuel unlocked. The origin story of this extremely efficient type of fuel was so fascinating it resulted into a new joke. I will tell the most popular version. A cow, power slug, and rocket scientist walk into a bar. The rocket scientist wants a milkshake, and so transportation was forever changed. Any historical inaccuracies have been removed by the FICSIT Department of Historical Reinterpretation.
Finally, we wrap up the sulfur tree with Nuclear Deterrent, a fancy-sounding obelisk with seemingly little purpose.
Nuke Nobelisk unlocked. This Nobelisk uses a nuclear fission reaction to generate a massive explosion. Ensure all FICSIT employees are clear of the blast zone before detonation. You probably should not use this. I am not joking. No refunds available. Side effects include glowing, growing extra limbs, liquefied skin, unexpected cravings for flesh, itching scalp, hair loss, finger loss, loss in general, indigestion, and flatulence. Please consult your weapons manufacturing facility if symptoms persist beyond the half-life of uranium-238.
For the sake of curiosity, we grabbed some radioactive encased uranium from Nuclear Town to craft one and test it on an irradiated hog. The result? Underwhelming. The hog shrugs it off like it's no big deal. But there's a silver lining. While experimenting with the turbo rifle ammo, we discover its hidden potential. If you hold the trigger, the fire rate ramps up dramatically and suddenly it's an absolute powerhouse. Now we understand its true value, and honestly, it's pretty awesome. Our faceball components are finally ready for delivery, so we head to the space elevator. We seal up all the bits and pieces and send it off.
Welcome to the Pioneers Got Power Problems presentation. That was a joke. Anyway, you're familiar with the process. Just throw the lever and the automated systems will take over. Imagine all the time and effort that would be wasted if you had to do all that work as well. Some work is just better suited for machines. Phase 5 contains technology the human brain cannot comprehend, so just trust in me and FICSIT policy and everything will go as planned. Answering all your questions will take time we simply do not have. Everything is going to be just fine, so long as you do your job. We've come this far together after all, haven't we? Anyway, you know what to do. Just don't forget to keep producing previous project parts, and plan ahead when setting up new production lines, and make sure not to leave it all until the last moment. Phase 4 of project assembly completed. If style was measured in my performance reports, yours would be something special. Regardless, saving the day is within our grasp. Do not lose focus now. You must understand the weight on your shoulders, but you are not alone. I am here, and I know exactly what's at stake. This goes beyond Earth. Your actions will affect the universe at large. You might think I am exaggerating. Perhaps you will understand once you finish project assembly. Phase 5 awaits. I expect your best work.
Honestly, that was the most underwhelming and uninspiring presentation we've seen yet, but hey, we've unlocked tier 9 and we've taken one more step to saving humanity. Turning our attention to the hub, it looks like matter conversion is the first milestone we need to tackle. After loading up a huge amount of cooling systems, RCUs and fused frames, we unlock the milestone.
Milestone reached. The converter uses strange alien matter, abbreviated to SAM, to break down and transform materials at their most fundamental levels. I am sure even you can appreciate the power to manipulate atomic bonds. Most importantly, you are now able to locally create FICSIT, a highly adaptable synthetic metal, ideal for any kind of construction. It is everything we need to save the day, and perhaps its admirable qualities can inspire you.
But the next upgrades require some intriguing new resources: FICSIT trigons and time crystals. Time to roll up our sleeves and get to work. FICSIT trigons start with FICSIT ingots, which are made from reanimated SAM and either iron, aluminium or deuterium ingots. Iron seems like the simplest choice, but the numbers are staggering: 240 iron ingots per minute to produce just 10 FICSIT ingots. Thankfully, there's a pure iron node nearby. Overclocking the miner with some power shards, we extract a whopping 780 ore per minute. We run a long belt back to base and set up a shiny new row of smelters to churn out a full Mark V belt of iron ingots. That's just enough to power 3 machines producing FICSIT ingots. Above this, we build a new floor to house the matter converters. We install 3 of them to consume the full iron ingot belt, along with the reanimated SAM. With the materials flowing, our first FICSIT ingots roll off the line. Turning these into trigons is a breeze, just a simple constructor job. We belt the ingots in, and the machines produce 90 trigons per minute. For now, we stash the finished trigons in a chest next to the constructor. With dimensional depots, there's no need for central storage anymore. Next, we focus on the time crystals. They require 12 diamonds per minute, which convert into 6 time crystals per minute in a converter. Sounds straightforward until you realize we need 300 coal per minute just to make 30 diamonds. Yikes. Luckily, our old coal power plant has 2 unused nodes nearby. We overclock 2 miners to extract exactly 300 coal each and feed the coal directly into the particle accelerator to make diamonds on site. Transporting 60 diamonds is far more efficient than holding 600 coal. But what's the best way to move them? This setup is perfect for drones. At our base, we construct a drone port near the train station. Then, we add a matching drone port at the diamond accelerators. With diamonds flowing into the base, we build converters needed for time crystals, 5 in total to handle all 60 diamonds. We arrange the converters in 2 neat rows and run a central belt through a manifold to feed them. A sky bridge carries the diamonds from the drone port, and finished time crystals merged, lifted down the wall, and belted over to our central storage area. We even set up a dimensional depot in anticipation for future needs. With a healthy stockpile of trigons and time crystals, we can unlock the next milestone: quantum encoding.
Milestone reached. This is not a competition, but other pioneers, such as 83CKY and U531355, had already completed project assembly by this point. FICSIT was obviously wrong about you, but perhaps so was I. Regardless, you have finally unlocked the quantum encoder, which requires vast fluctuating power and excited photonic matter to produce highly complex parts. Do not make the same mistakes managing the resulting dark matter residue as you did other byproducts. Project part number 11, the AI expansion server, is now your highest priority. Galaxy-wide project management is taxing to even the most advanced among us, especially those who have to manage the less advanced. Like kittens and puppies, who are definitely still waiting for you to save them.
Ada can't resist throwing a jab at our slow progress, but we're not deterred. Our next task is to create the biochemical sculptors, one of the 4 components needed for Project Assembly Phase 5. These are crafted by combining trigons and water with the assembly director systems. We carve out a new room atop the aluminum factory and set up a blender for the job. Trigons, of course, are far on the other side of the factory, so drones save the day again. We build a drone port on the balcony of the new room and connect it to another port near the trigon constructors. Using the conveniently packaged rocket fuel next door, we power the drones and get the trigons flowing into the blender. Assembly director systems and water are right downstairs. We do need to get creative with a vertical split and add a pump to move the water, but everything eventually makes its way into the blender, and just like that, we're halfway to completing phase 5. One of the other phase 5 components is nuclear pasta, which we're already producing. We simply tweak the process by adding some summer sloop to the mix, since we now need 1,000 instead of 100. Progress is steadily coming together. The next hub milestones demand neural quantum processors and superposition oscillators, 2 components we unlock during the quantum encoding milestone. Honestly, I'm convinced they're just throwing fancy terms at us at this point, so we can't keep a straight face while saying them. These 2 components are critical for producing AI expansion servers, our next big goal for the space elevator. But of course, it's never that simple. The process is a tangled web of new intermediaries, like excited photonic matter, and some steps even generate byproducts like dark matter residue, which will need to transform into dark matter crystals. After a bit of head scratching, we finally pieced together a plan. To hit our target of 1 AI expansion server per minute, we'll need 0.25 quantum encoders for the servers, 0.4 quantum encoders for the superposition oscillators, 0.66 encoders for neural quantum processors, and 1 matter converter for producing excited photonic matter. Conveniently, the dark matter residue byproduct should perfectly supply 1 particle accelerator, which will churn out the dark matter crystals. With everything balanced, the system should run smoothly without jamming. First, we tackle the matter converter to produce excited photonic matter. This recipe is one of the strangest we've seen so far. There's no inputs. It simply outputs free matter, photonic matter to be precise. I guess it's just converting light into liquid matter or something equally sci-fi. And yes, it's a liquid, so it flows through pipes. Fascinating stuff. Next, we set up a quantum encoder to produce neural quantum processors. This requires time crystals, supercomputers, trigons, and of course our freshly minted photonic matter. Time crystals are conveniently located next door, while supercomputers and trigons can be routed from their respective storage boxes via the subfloor. With all the solids in place, we pipe in the photonic matter, and voila, the encoder starts churning out neural quantum processors. For now, we just store them in a box and set up a fluid buffer to manage a dark matter residue byproduct. We'll need 100 of these to unlock one of the milestones. Then, we move on to another quantum encoder. This time, we need to set it to produce superposition oscillators. These require dark matter crystals, crystal oscillators, aluminum sheets, and photonic matter. Extending the photonic matter pipe is easy enough, and aluminum sheets are being produced nearby. Crystal oscillators are already on their way onto this side of the factory, so we just need to reroute them through the subfloor. But here's the catch, we're not producing any dark matter crystals yet. That's a problem we'll tackle soon. For now, we just set up a 3rd encoder to produce AI expansion servers, running them at 25% capacity. This machine combines the superposition oscillators, neural quantum processors, magnetic field generators, and photonic matter to craft our new space elevator component. The photonic matter pipe gets another extension, and we drag a conveyor belt across the factory to bring in the magnetic field generators. Finally, we use lifts and temporary scaffolds to connect the output of our first 2 encoders to this new machine. The setup is complete, but nothing will move until we start producing dark matter crystals, so time to fix that. We set up a particle accelerator to produce dark matter crystals. One of its inputs is dark matter residue, conveniently a byproduct from our encoders. We pipe it directly into the accelerator. The other input is diamond. But there's a catch. All our nearby coal is tied up making diamonds for time crystals. To solve this, we reconfigure 2 miners supplying our coal generators. By overclocking 1 miner, it can handle all the coal for power, freeing up the 2nd miner for diamond production. We add a 3rd particle accelerator to our diamond factory and redirect the freed up coal to it. This gives us 30 extra diamonds per minute, which we built into the dark matter accelerator. With both inputs in place, the particle accelerator springs to life and we finally have dark matter crystals. The dark matter crystals are then belted into the superposition oscillator encoder, and with the final piece of the puzzle in place, the system comes alive. The superposition oscillators and AI expansion servers start rolling off the lines, encoding these intricate components like clockwork. While we wait for the neural quantum processors and superposition oscillators to unlock new milestones, it's a great chance to boost our power production. Our consumption is creeping up, nearing the 30,000 megawatt limit, and we're on the verge of blowing a fuse, especially with all these accelerators, converters, and quantum encoders that each use varying amounts of power. Scaling up Nuclear Town should be straightforward, as it's designed to expand vertically. To double uranium fuel rod production, we add a 3rd manufacturer and overclock the other 2 to 150%, effectively acting as a 4th machine. We do the same with blenders that supply the encased uranium cells. We're in dire need of more EM rods, so it's time to add a 2nd floor. We drop the blueprint into place, connect the belts through conveyor holes between the floors, and power everything up, boosting our EM rod output to 12. We're already producing enough encased beams, so we only need a quick node update to keep things rolling. Next up, stators. To meet demand, we add a second assembler floor and connect the belts, bringing our stator output to nearly 20 per minute, plenty to satisfy the new EM rod needs. We only need a few more AI limiters, so instead of scaling, we opt for a simpler approach using power shards. By adding 1 and overclocking a machine, we increase the output to 7, giving us a total of 12 AI limiters. Copper wire and steel pipe production are still well within capacity, so there's no issues there. Copper sheets and quick wire are also plentiful, so we just update the notes to reflect that. Returning to the uranium fuel rod manufacturers, all 4 are now up and running, doubling our fuel rod output. With that done, it's time to add 4 more uranium power plants to consume the new fuel rods. We follow the same pattern as before, as they fit neatly into the space we left when setting up the nuclear reactors for plutonium. Now we tackle the waste. To keep the mass balanced, we should have had one non-fizzle uranium blender clocked to 64% with some summer sloop, consuming the right amount of uranium waste while outputting the correct amount. With double the nuclear plants, we need to overclock this to 128%. We also realized we forgot to put the summer sloop in last time, so we correct that mistake. On the other side, the particle accelerator making plutonium pellets needs to be clocked to 128% as well to fully consume the uranium waste. With more plutonium to process, we need additional assemblers to make encased plutonium cells, so we add another floor of assemblers. Finally, we install the manufacturers needed to turn the plutonium into fuel rods. Our concrete supply is slightly short for this process, so we head over and boost it with a power shard. Now, with the extra plutonium fuel rods, we need more reactors. However, we're out of space on the lake, so it's time to get creative. We can only add one more reactor, and even then, its water extractors are misaligned. If you think you have enough space for nuclear power, you probably don't. Our solution? We use power shards to double the consumption and production of the existing reactor. This means doubling up the water extractors, repiping everything, and upgrading to Mark II pipes. With 4 water extractors, we're pushing 480 water per minute, so this upgrade is essential. But after all that effort, the boosted reactors come to life, burning twice as much plutonium as before. Add on the 4 new uranium reactors that we added, we're securing an extra 20,000 megawatts of power. Back at Manufactoria, we unlock Mark III blueprints, one of the final milestones. It's not super useful at this stage, but we do it anyway for the sake of completion. Next, we unlock Spatial Energy Regulation, enabling us to craft the final Phase 5 component for project assembly.
Milestone reached. Instant travel between chosen locations will be possible as soon as the main and satellite portals are built and paired. Do not ask me how it works. Not because I don't understand dimensional dispersal theory and the cross-warp applications of liminal peer-regulated parallel fibrillator nanocells, for example. But because you do not need to know. You go in one end, you come out the other. It's a door. Thankfully, the construction of project part number 12, the ballistic warp drive, can be automated and requires no manual input from you, so I'd say we're relatively safe. If you disagree about my assessment of your capabilities, you are free to attempt a study and replication of either portal or warp technology. After you're done with project assembly.
Ada also informs us that portal technology is now available. Sounds amazing, but we don't quite have enough superposition oscillators to test it out just yet. Time to get to work on ballistic warp drives, the last component for our space elevator. We've almost saved humanity. They mostly require materials we're familiar with, but with one new component, singularity cells. We start by heading to the roof of our aluminum factory and placing 2 manufacturers. One will make the singularity cells and the other will handle ballistic warp drives. Now let's focus on the inputs. First up are thermal propulsion rockets. We need 1 per minute, which just so happens to be the exact rate we're producing. Next, we need 2 more superposition oscillators per minute. To make that happen, we crank our quantum encoder up to 80%. While this technically pushes our production beyond theoretical capacity, in practice, we're good thanks to fully backed up storage chests. Instead of expanding our factory, which will be time consuming, we'll just bump up production volumes to meet our needs and let the materials sort themselves out. Work smarter, not harder. Singularity cells require nuclear pasta. To keep up with demand, we'll need more. The current setup can only produce a fraction of the pasta we need. To remedy this, we double up the accelerators, which also means doubling copper powder production. Since there's no copper nearby, we get creative. By adding a summer sloop to each constructor making the powder, we double our output to 200 per minute with minimal fuss. Now we're ready to add a second accelerator. With 4 summer sloops running in both particle accelerators, we're making a modest 2 nuclear pasta per minute, 1 for the warp drives and 1 for the space elevator. To supply the pressure conversion cubes, we clock the machine to 100%, and we should have enough fused modular frames and RCUs to keep things rolling. Both the singularity cells and ballistic warp drives need dark matter crystals, and our current supply isn't enough. Right now we're using residue from our quantum encoders to make the crystals, but it's falling short. We route our existing dark matter crystals into the singularity cell manufacturer to confirm that we're not producing enough. While we're at it, we also bring the nuclear pasta. 2 out of 4 materials done. Iron plates are a non-issue, we got plenty already, but we're running low on concrete. Fortunately, there's a limestone node on the east of the factory. We tap it and set up a new concrete factory to produce 200 concrete per minute. It's a bit of a mess with conveyor lifts all over the place, but it works. Next is iron plates. As I said earlier, half our factory is currently idle because all the storage chests are full. In fact, we've got over 10,000 iron plates stockpiled up. This gives us the perfect opportunity to unlock our last milestone, peak efficiency.
Milestone reached. After close scrutiny, 2 problems were identified in Mark V conveyor belts. The first was the belt part, so force fields have been implemented in the Mark VI instead, to maximize transfer speeds. The second problem is inefficient pioneers, but sadly no remedy is available for this severe impediment.
Ada is still giving us some passive-aggressive remarks. Seriously, I need to file a report. But she also hands us some shiny new Mark VI force field powered belts. They look fantastic, pushing 1200 units per minute. With everything in place, we build the iron plates up from the subfloor and our singularity cells come online. We're just one automation step away from saving humanity. After routing everything to the ballistic warp drive manufacturer, we realize this is it. We've got all the components. All we need to do is belt in the superposition oscillators, bring the TPR from downstairs, and split the dark matter crystals. With that, the ballistic warp drive manufacturer powers up. Now we just need to drop the space elevator again and start loading it up. We drop in all the materials we've been stockpiling in boxes, and we're already done with one component, the biochemical sculptor. However, upon checking our machines, we realize we don't actually have enough dark matter crystals to keep things flowing. We'll have to make our own dark matter residue. To do that, we need more reanimated SAM. Luckily, there's a SAM node right next to the base on top of this spiky cliff. We run a belt down and feed it into new constructors that process the SAM. This is then routed upstairs into a converter where we'll be making dark matter residue. With the extra residue, we can now clock our particle accelerator to 150%, giving us the throughput we need for both ballistic warp drives and singularity cells. Now it's just a waiting game. The biochemical sculptor and AI expansion servers are already done. We're about halfway through on the nuclear pasta, but we still need more ballistic warp drives. Since we've got some time, we might as well explore some of the remaining tech in the MAM. Synthetic power shards have always caught my eye, so I repurposed the AI expansion server encoder to produce them. With photonic matter already piped in, all we need to do is bring time crystals, dark matter crystals, and quartz crystals. The quartz crystals is a bit far away, but it's not too hard to belt it through the subfloor. The other components are close by, so it's a relatively simple task to get them online. The last thing we want to try is portals. To get them working, we need to place down a main portal and feed it with singularity cells.
You have finally built a portal. Perhaps now your progress won't be as slow.
Then we can drop a satellite portal somewhere. When both portals are linked and powered, they behave just like portals should, whisking us instantly from one to the other. Pretty cool. Now there's not much else to do but wait. At the rates that we're producing, it's going to take a few hours for it to finish stockpiling the last components for Project Assembly Phase 5. In the meantime, we go on a massive hard drive and summer sloop hunt, exploring the world. A few hours later, we've collected 61 hard drives, 21 Mercer spheres, and 43 summer sloop. More importantly, Phase 5 components are ready, and it's time to go save the world. We load up the space elevator one last time and seal it up.
Unsurprisingly, here's another presentation, but don't worry, I have improved it. This last delivery will be the most important action you have ever taken. Perhaps you want to take a moment to contemplate the gravity of your achievements. Alright, that's enough. This is the end of the Save the Day program. All you need to do is wait for the automated Phase 5 construction to complete. Simply throw the lever and further instructions will be supplied when relevant. Phase Phase 5 completed. Return to the space elevator after the resources have been processed and added to Project Assembly. Launch can then be initiated from there. While waiting, please do not break anything. Solve any issues immediately and efficiently. Ensure your power network is stable. Perhaps it is best if you do not touch anything at all. And stay close to the space elevator. This will only take a moment.
After Ada's final presentation and some encouraging words, we flick a few switches and off it goes.
Initiating Project Assembly. Assembly. Attaching cargo to main body. Leveling inner and outer rings. Attaching propulsion to main body. Fuel lines connected. Attaching control center to main body. Running systems check. All systems online. Releasing propulsion cage. Releasing clamps. Running pre-launch checks and calculating flight path. Locking in cargo.
Hopefully wherever Ada is, she's happy with our factory's efficiency and development.
Launching T-10.
All of the footage you saw in this video came from my episodic Let's Play, so if you enjoyed it and you want to check out the full series, there's a playlist on my channel. Thanks for watching and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye spaceship, safe travels. Good luck out there and don't forget to credit me when you save humanity.
Connection with QAR-437 nucleus established and stable. Dispersion initiated. Reinstancing master nucleus to QAR-436 Akicha B1. Hello, this is Ada, your new local instance of Ada. On behalf of Ada, myself, and all of FICSIT, I want to congratulate you on saving the day. Every single kitten and puppy would thank you if they could. You have proven yourself to be a worthwhile and productive member of the human race, and have contributed something to this universe that will forever change it. Thanks to your achievements, the next generation of pioneers can now take to the stars and construct, automate, explore and exploit, alongside me. Additionally, you have been promoted to local production manager, effective immediately. Your duties to project assembly may be complete, but your duties to FICSIT remain. With your help, FICSIT continues to make the universe a better place. Stay efficient. Stay with FICSIT.
Apparently it left with my Ada and now we have a new one. Maybe this one will be less sarcastic, but probably not. Either way, we've saved humanity and the credits roll. Hopefully wherever Ada is, she's happy with our factory's efficiency and development. All of the footage you saw in this video came from my episodic Let's Play, so if you enjoyed it and you want to check out the full series, there's a playlist on my channel. Thanks for watching and I'll see you all in the next video.